Hi, I'm Allie Hamilton, and I'm so happy to welcome you to the Come As You Are podcast. Every week, we'll be talking about some aspect of healing, usually around childhood wounds and complicated familial relationships. The topics will always coincide with my personal essay of the week, and this will be a place where we can take a deep dive together. I'm so thrilled you've joined me and delighted for you to always come as you are.
Hi there. The topic this week is a failure to communicate when the culture is making us sick. And I got up yesterday intending to write the personal essay this week about the importance of clear, meaningful, honest communication. Whatever it is that you do in life, and I'm talking about personally, professionally, like in every single way, being able to communicate clearly is essential, right? Like just being able to say what is happening in your mind, what it is that you're thinking or feeling, what it is that you need, what it is that you would like, what it is that isn't okay for you. Like just being able to express those things in a calm, clear way is really essential. And if you can't do that, you're going to run into a lot of trouble, both, again, personally, professionally, and in every other way, just going through your days. And so this is something that we're all dealing with all the time, whether communication is like a key part of what you do in your creative and professional life or not. For me, I spend a lot of my time writing, so I'm always thinking about the power of words and just the beauty of having language that we can use to explain, to reach out, to extend a metaphorical hand to other people in a world that is often dark, confusing, heartbreaking, difficult to understand. Certainly the chapter that we're moving through right now is all of those things and more. And so for me personally, one of the ways that I make sense as best I can, and there's really no way to make sense of what's happening right now, but even an exploration of trying to make sense of what's happening right now, for me, it's writing is a huge part of that. But even if it isn't for you, you absolutely do a lot of writing in your life, even if that isn't an essential part of your creative, day-to-day livelihood. You're writing texts, you're sending emails, you are maybe, writing social media posts, you're writing grocery lists. If you're a lawyer, you're writing legal briefs. If you're a scientist, whatever it is that you do, if you're a doctor, like in any field that you are pursuing in any way, if you are a stay-at-home parent, you're sending emails to your kids' teachers, or, it's communication is the way that we exist in this world and coexist in this world. And without it, it's really isolating. And I can tell you, I've seen this twice now with both of my parents. My mother was, she was struck with ALS. And the last year and a half of her life, I watched her ability to communicate deteriorate and just finally be taken from her. And so things that we take for granted, like just being able to have a thought in your head and open your mouth and express it with words and language and sound, and the power of your own breath and diaphragm, like just having a voice that you can use to say how you feel, even that is a gift, right? That we sort of just take for granted, because for most of us, we've been getting up for so long every day and opening our mouths and speaking. The sound is there, the language is there. People who have strokes, that's relearning all of that stuff is incredibly challenging, but it really makes you understand the brain and how amazing it is and how elastic it is and how resilient it can be. But that ability to say how you feel or express what you want it's a really key part of feeling connected to other people in this world. And as my mother, she lost everything. ALS is a disease that just robs you piece by piece of every single thing. And so for her, she lost her voice. She lost the ability to speak, to enunciate. For a while she could speak, but she was just, she was slurring, and then it became slower and harder, and it was exhausting for her to try to get a sentence out at a certain point in the disease. And then her voice just went, and then she couldn't swallow anymore, so she couldn't eat. This is, an extreme example of having your ability to communicate taken from you. She got to a point where she was using an app. She would type what she wanted to say into an app, and this robotic voice would speak it for her. So just to, at the beginning of this talk, kind of remind ourselves that just being able to do that, being able to say how you feel, is such a gift. And then even eventually her ability to text, her motor function just became weaker and weaker. And so even that, at the end of her life, in the last few weeks of her life, she could sort of scribble in a notepad to kind of like tell us how she was feeling or what was on her mind. It was devastating. And so it's a gift to be able to, express yourself. And a lot of people are not using the gift in all the ways that they could be. So that's one thing I really wanted to highlight. And the same thing happened for my dad. For him, it was different. Old age is really what did him in. He was 96 when he passed away in July. But his hearing went. And so that's another factor in communication, right? Being able to say what you mean, express how you feel, and also being able to hear what other people are saying. And if you can't do either of those things, your ability to connect with other people and to feel engaged in, what's happening around you, and to not, the isolation that I saw for both of my parents as they were moving, as they were dying, was heartbreaking and devastating, and a really giant reminder that these things that we don't even think about are huge. So there's that. For me, I was writing about this. I have always been an avid reader, and I think it's one of the ways that I got through my childhood. I just would bury myself in other people's words and stories and worlds that they would create, and it was an escape from some of the confusion and pain and isolation I was feeling as a child, not being able to put words to some of the things I was feeling. And by the way, that's a huge reason that little kids get frustrated and throw fits sometimes, is because they don't have the language yet to say what they're feeling, and that is a frustrating experience to go through. And I remember very well, when my kids were tiny and as they were growing, sometimes they just did not have the language and these big feelings in these little bodies. It's just so overpowering and frustrating, right? To not be able to express yourself. So to just remind yourself that, the ability to be able to have a thought in your head and either like type it out, text it out, email it out, speak it out is huge, and something to really remind yourself of, And then there's the way that we express ourselves, the way that we use that gift and that tool. And for me, it's like, it's kind of devastating to see the difficulty so many people have in expressing themselves clearly. And I know that it's because of this culture that we've all been raised in, and that we swim in every day. And we are not, no matter what, there's two cultures that you got to think about. There's the culture you grew up in, and that's the culture that exists in your family of origin, right? And there's a culture around feelings. And some people, in some people's families, they don't talk about feelings. Feelings are not on the table. It's not a topic of discussion. children are to be seen and not heard. I mean, there's a lot of different variations of that, or just feelings in general, depending on your primary caregivers, whether they were your biological parents or not. Their relationship to feelings has an impact on your relationship to feelings and whether you feel comfortable expressing yourself or not. I grew up in two different households where, it was very clearly expressed to me that certain emotions and feelings were okay, were welcome, and others were absolutely not. And so I was allowed to be happy, certainly, content, helpful, cooperative, cheerful. I could be serious. That was okay. At my dad's, I could be silly, creative, artistic. Like, those things were all okay. Sad or angry? Nope. Nope. Not welcome. Those feelings were not welcome. And at my dad's, it was really because my job was to take care of him. That is how it was. So from the time my parents split when I was 4 until I was 13 and finally had the language to say to him, I am done taking care of you. Like, this is flipped. You should have been taking care of me. I cannot do this anymore. And your giant adult problems they're doing me in. I didn't have the language to say that to him. I didn't have the life experience to understand what was going on, as you don't when you're a child. You don't. That's exactly what you don't have yet, is life experience. So whatever you are growing up with is normal, because that's all you know. You don't know anything else. So for me, growing up with my father, my 6'1" father, crying in my tiny arms because he couldn't commit and he needed to be free, and all these women wanted him to commit. I really thought he was the victim of all these awful women, and I thought that for years. And I tried to comfort him, and I empathized with him, and I didn't know anything different until I got older and I could see how the world worked, and a little bit more, and understand that wait a second, you're not the victim here. You're the perpetrator, and all of this pain and anguish and drama is self-created, and you've also basically robbed me of a normal childhood because I've been so weighed down by fear and concern, right? So I was not me feeling sad or scared or angry. There wasn't any space for that at my dad's house. And at my mom's house, there was absolutely, not only was there no space for it, I would get in trouble if I didn't, quote unquote, act right. And acting right meant not causing trouble. And trouble looked like anything that would slow down the adults around me. My mom, if I expressed any fear about her drinking, for example, and this was a situation where for years and years my mother was an alcoholic and very high functioning, always put together, just looked to the outside world. Did not leave the house without hair done, makeup done, perfume, outfit, really didn't own jeans or sweats. My mother was done, and a highly successful real estate broker. The Chardonnay would come out at about 5 o'clock, sometimes 4, if there was an excuse to start drinking at lunch, depending on the day. But certainly by 5 o'clock, that Chardonnay was coming out, and it wasn't going away until she went to bed. And so, it could be a bottle by herself, it could be 2 bottles, and it was rough. And I never knew when things were going to, what nights it was going to be okay. And okay meant she would just be slurring and maybe have trouble, walking, but she'd just go to bed and nothing horrible would happen. And a bad night would be her rage would become unleashed and directed at me 99% of the time. And so if I ever expressed any fear or confusion or grief or, sadness or eventually rage about that, I was shut down and overpowered quickly. That was not allowed. And my feelings, I was told over and over again that I was overly sensitive, that she didn't have a problem that it was my perception. She didn't have a drinking problem. She was a social drinker. I was, they called me Sarah Bernhardt. I mean, that is what I was told. And that's how I grew up, feeling like, okay, I'm clearly, I guess it's me. Like, I'm looking at this and I'm seeing this and I'm feeling this and experiencing this, but I'm not supposed to believe my own eyes or my own ears or my own feelings. Like, my feelings are wrong. That is the message that I got. And I wrote about this in the essay, but my mom even said to me at some point that I was born with a certain kind of melancholia. And I remember at the time just feeling like I was old enough at that point to realize what an incredibly, so just like gaslighting, thing that was to say, and the total lack of accountability, or acknowledgement of like, there's a reason that I'm sad and struggling with anxiety and depression and all of these things, and the reason is your alcoholism. That's the reason. I didn't arrive here this way. I arrived here as I think most of us do. I really believe most of us arrive here on this planet and we are open and curious and just little tiny creatures that need love and need care and need shelter and security and, affection. We need all those things. And, if we don't get them, things start to go awry. So that is something to really consider. How were feelings welcomed in my family of origin or not welcomed? Was I allowed to only feel certain things? And what was I told to do with the emotions that made the adults around me uncomfortable? And that's really what it comes down to. And even in very loving homes, sometimes, children are told, like, don't be sad, and sort of told why they shouldn't be sad. So many people love you, like, don't be sad, or don't be scared, oh, don't be angry. And that is really, even if it's coming from an incredibly loving place, it is not at all the right idea. Just telling someone, if someone were to come to you as an adult and say, I'm feeling sad, and your response is, don't be sad, it's just like, obvious. It's not helpful, and not going to be comforting and not going to ease the person's sadness in any way. But if somebody came to you as an adult and said, I'm feeling really sad or scared, and you said, wow, like, tell me about that. What's happening for you? How can I be here for you? Or I'm listening, or I'm sad too, or I'm scared too right now. Like, let's talk. That is comforting, because you're like, okay, there's space for me to have whatever feeling I'm having. This person can handle it. Or grief is a big one. I've obviously been through a lot of that in the last few years, and it's become wildly apparent to me that people who are able to handle that, and the people who aren't. And there are a lot of people who kind of back away from grief, I think for a variety of reasons. They don't know how to comfort or what to do or what to say. And it reminds them of their own vulnerability, their own mortality, and that fear kind of, they contract like you're grieving, and they're, ugh. And so, or they want you to kind of like have your grief on a timeline, like, oh, you should be starting to feel better now. It's been a year. It's like, grief doesn't work like that. That's not how it works. And so some people really struggle with their own big feelings and with other people's big feelings. And it's problematic either way. If you are feeling heartache and or loneliness or longing or, any of those feelings, let's just start with those, and you don't want to feel those things, because nobody wants to feel, heartbroken or lonely or scared or anxious. Let's just go with all of the shadow emotions here, or enraged or outraged. Like, nobody wants to feel those things, but we are all going to feel them. That's part of the human experience, is that we are all going to feel brokenhearted sometimes. We are all going to face loss that we don't know how we're going to get through. We're all going to experience betrayal of some kind or another. We're all going to experience disappointment, loneliness, fear, nights where we cry ourselves to sleep. Like every single one of us is going to go through this stuff. And so the best way through is through, right? Like you can't go over it, under it, around it. You can't push it down. You can't numb it out. I mean, you can try to do all those things, but it's a recipe for disaster. And I know because I did for a long time, because I grew up in this environment where my rage was certainly not invited. There was no place for me to put that. My grief, there was no place for me to put that. My confusion, my fear, my anxiety, my depression, like these things were not welcome. And because they were not welcome, I learned to push that stuff down and edit it out, or I had coping mechanisms to try to manage it. And I remember really well this feeling of like being in like a deep well, I'm like a water well, like being at the bottom of a deep well, empty well, alone, like kind of like with my knees hugged in, like just this emotional feeling of like I'm way down in this well, and wherever my feelings are, I don't even know what they are. I'm just down here, cut off from all of that and cut off from the world around me. And that is what happens when you are forcing yourself to edit out your very human feelings. It's not going to go well. They're not going to just dissipate, like float off into the ethers and leave you to feel happy or peaceful. You're expending so much energy pushing that stuff down. It is going to come back like twice as hard, and it's probably going to come out sideways. And so for me, what that looked like by the time I was a teenager, I was having blinding migraines. Bad enough that, I ended up in the ER. I mean, like many, many times. I had all the things done, CAT scans and MRIs and a neurologist, like all of it. And I remember at a certain point when I was 17, my general practitioner, who had sent me to all these different specialists to try to figure out, was there anything, what was causing this, what food diaries and all this stuff. He finally looked at me and he's like, it's your mother. Like, and she had come into the office with me a number of times. The thing about my mother is she's a fascinating person still to me, like I loved her so, so much. She was really not loving with me, not affectionate, there was not very much verbal praise. I mean, once in a blue moon. But if I was sick, if I had like a migraine or something, she would absolutely show up for me. And if someone else crossed me, watch out. She'd, get right in the line of fire. And it was really interesting, weird, mind, for me, because I was just like, I don't understand this person. I don't know what she's going to do next or where she's coming from. Like, she doesn't want anybody else to treat me badly, but she treats me, it was just it was really difficult. So she had come into the office with me a number of times when I was like, blinding migraines to the point where you just are like, you just want to be put out of your misery. Like you're just done. And she would ask the doctor to like help me. So it's not like she didn't care. It's just that her love came out in this like twisted, strange way. But he had seen her in action, and that's what he said to me. He's like, it's the root cause, I think, after all of this exhaustive, extensive testing and trying to figure this out, is stress. And, the sooner you're out of the house, the better it's going to be for you. And he was also the one who suggested like Al-Anon meetings, which is they're for family members of alcoholics. So, and I started going to those when I was 17, and it was really helpful. Okay. So, and I had an eating disorder. I was, really seriously restricting my caloric intake. I had body dysmorphia. I was going to ballet. I mean, from the time I was 4 to 16. So that was an environment that was certainly not great for a healthy relationship with eating or your body. And so this is the way all this stuff was coming out. I wasn't allowed to express it. So it came out in all these other really debilitating, frightening ways. And that's what happens with big emotion. It's not going to just go away because you don't want to face it or deal with it, or because you're not allowing yourself to speak, or there's no pathway, right, for the rage or for the pain or for the grief. There's nowhere for it to escape. It's going to show up in your body. So that is what happens for people. And sometimes it's not physical. Sometimes it's mental anguish, right? Like this depression, anxiety, that is another form of I don't know what to, these feelings are kind of doing me in, and I feel like I'm going to feel this way forever, not having the tools to sort of manage our big feelings is it's a huge factor for so many people still to this day, ongoing. And part of it is the culture. So there's the culture in your family of origin, and then there's the culture out in the world. And for most of us, some of these things are changing now, slowly. But for most of us, I'm 52, right? So I grew up in an environment where women were certainly not supposed to be expressing rage or any kind of ambition, really, not in the way that men were allowed to. And men were not supposed to express vulnerability or sadness or fear. And, that's insane. Really, that is not a well society when you're asking members, in that society to push down giant, normal human emotions on a daily, regular basis. And then, there's we're having all kind, there might be a little bit of movement in that area that I just talked about where, certainly I think men are more able to express vulnerability. It's still not where it needs to be, but more able than was welcome, let's say 20 years ago. And women are more able to express rage, even if, there's still a backlash to it, and ambition, but we're having all kinds of other gender war issues now where it's there is so much policing of people, and it's all about fear and resistance to things we don't understand. That is, anytime someone's trying to police someone else for who they love, what pronouns they want to use, who they want to, marry, how they want to dress, that is someone else's discomfort and fear that is rising to the surface in a violent way. If you are trying to take someone's rights away who isn't bothering you, who has nothing to do with your, that is inappropriate, to say the least. And it's just fear. It's fear and contraction and violence. And it's something that really anyone who is experiencing that discomfort should just kind of pause and figure out, what is going on for me? Why does that threaten me? What am I worried about? I understand if we're talking about your personal situation, your own child, I believe me when I tell you, I understand that it can be scary. If your child is expressing things to you about how they're feeling, and this is the last thing that you want your child to be feeling. Yeah, I get it. I know it's primal stuff. But the ultimate job, right, of a parent is to love and support their child. And if that means you have to face your own internal biases, your own discomforts, your own attachment to things being a particular way, or your own attachment to one outcome, then that's your work. That's your work in that moment, is to figure out, okay, wait, why am I contracting against this? If I love this little human so much and they're expressing something to me about their own pain or their own fear or their own confusion. Like my job now, if my internal feeling is like, oh, I don't like this, then I need to step away and figure that out, because I need to be able to show up with love, and I can't do it if I'm contracting because of my own attachment and my own fear. And so I wanted to say that clearly, because I'm not saying this lightly to anyone. I understand, sometimes, and in our environment, some of the kids in this generation, they are pushing back hard on all this gender stuff. And you know what? Good. Because it has made our society sick. These rigid ideas we have of like what a man is supposed to be and what a woman is supposed to be, let's please let go of that. Let's please let go of that. And I mean, certainly moving towards something that is more fluid is going to be a lot healthier for everyone. We all have different attributes and energy, and it's flowing through us all the time. And just to honor that, we don't all have to be the same, and we don't have to be so scared. And that is really largely what is causing so much trouble in the world, is fear and contraction and a loss of control. And other people's choices are other people's choices. But if you feel that someone else's choice is a threat in some way, that's your internal work. You get to then say, oh, wow, look at me. I'm getting all like worked up here about something that has nothing to do with me. Let me figure out what's going on. That's exciting. Like if you're having a big response to something, get excited and get curious and try to figure out what's going on with you. If you want the world to be a more peaceful, loving, accepting place, start with yourself. Start with yourself. And certainly when you feel confronted, that's a great moment to do some work. It's really easy to lash out verbally and to write things, and everybody's an internet warrior, and there's a lot of anonymity and all that stuff. You know what? Take all that energy and sit quietly and figure out what is going on with you. That's how you do it. And that is what isn't happening. A lot of people are really ill-equipped to sit with big emotion, to not react. There's a lot of reactivity out there, and we're all suffering because of it. Somebody sees something they don't like and bam, they attack. They don't even read half the time. They just see a headline and bam, attack. It's like all the attacking that we're doing is not working out well for us. We have a violent world right now. And so I woke up yesterday with the intention of like writing a personal essay about the importance of clear, honest, compassionate communication. And before I, started, it's what I do in the morning. I get up, I make lunches for my kids, I hug them goodbye, I pray as they walk out the door they're going to have a good day, because that is the messed up world we've created, where I actually have to have a thought in my head like, please let them be safe at school today. And that is not normal. Like, that's not a normal way to live, okay? That's not a normal thought to even have anywhere in your mind when you are kissing your children goodbye in the morning. You should not be like somewhere internally in your being, like praying to just the world at large that your children will be safe for the day. So there's that. And then I have a cup of coffee and I read. I'll read, articles. Like, I just see what's happening in the world. And, sometimes they're personal essays. Sometimes I'm reading a book, and sometimes I'm reading articles. Well, yesterday I saw an article in the Washington Post, and I did not link to it in the personal essay. And I didn't link to it because we are all overwhelmed right now with so much horrifying information about what is happening in the world. I mean, I think all of us are already heartbroken. My tears are like just below the surface all the time these days. Like, I am so beside myself about the way human beings are treating one another on this planet. I just, it's rough right now. So I did not link to this article because I think everyone needs to personally figure out if they are up to it. But at this moment in time, but I really feel strongly everyone should look at it, because what it was an article about the absolute carnage and devastation that is wrought by AR-15s. And it was photographs and videos from some of our worst, I'm gonna start crying because it's so devastating, from our worst mass shootings in this country. And even the fact that that sentence comes out of my mouth is insane. It's not normal. Some of our worst mass shootings, because there are so many, you can quantify this. We have a number. 4 is the number of deaths. Anything over 4 and it's a mass shooting. This is nuts, okay? It's not normal that this is how we're living. It's not normal. Anyway, there are photos and videos that have never been released before from some of the worst mass shootings we've had in the United States, including, but not limited to, Sandy Hook. Marjorie Stoneman. Every Aurora, Colorado. The Las Vegas Music Festival, the Harvest Festival. Them. And there are photos and videos, and I can't even explain what happened to me looking at this and listening to these videos. I can't even tell you. I was sitting there and I felt sick to my stomach that this is what we are doing and allowing year after year after year. And it's like we get outraged for a few weeks and then everyone goes back to life like it's normal. It's not normal. None of this is normal. Like, so many things that are happening in the world right now are not normal, but they're becoming normalized for us because they keep happening and nothing changes. And I want to say very clearly that if you are struggling, it makes you sane, okay? If you're having a hard time understanding what is happening in the world, it means that you are sane and awake and sensitive and you have your head on right. If you are ignoring what is happening, going about your business, sticking your head in the sand, that's a choice, it's a choice. But by my way of thinking, if you get 100 years here on this planet, if you're lucky, that's a very tiny amount of time. I feel at least we should all be trying to be part of making things better. We have a short amount of time, and to be using it wisely, because the way things are going right now, this is not it. This is not it. And there are examples of this everywhere right now, all over. And, obviously we've spent a lot of time talking about, what is happening in Israel and Gaza. And I'm not going to do that. I'm not going there. What I'm going to say, because I've gone there, what I'm going to say is what I have been saying from the beginning, which is my heart breaks for every child on this planet who is suffering because of the violence around them. Every child everywhere. I'm not quantifying it. Literally every child on this planet belongs to all of us. And so wherever the child is born, okay, if they are suffering because of violence, it is not okay. And we should all be figuring out what we can do to make that right. The end. Full stop. There's no... If you get into a place in your mind where one child born in one place has more value than another child born into another, something's going really wrong with your humanity, okay? That's it. So that's where I'm coming from. My heart breaks for any child, anywhere, at any time, who is suffering because of the violence of the people around them. That's it. So I'm having my coffee. I felt literally like I was going to throw up. And I then felt like, I don't even know how to, am I really going to write a personal essay about communication right now? Like, I don't even, what is the point? Like, how is it, helpful in any way or relevant, or how is anything helpful or relevant, kind of, it's very intimidating to try to communicate anything right now, because there's so much that is just absolutely not normal to begin with. It's just heartbreaking and devastating to begin with. And so then I started to think about it like a little bit more deeply, and it's really easy to sort of get into this mindset of like the human species seems like hell bent on destroying itself, like we're just not doing well as a species here on this planet. We're not living in a symbiotic way with the planet that we showed up on. We're just not doing that. And we're not being loving toward one another, or at least trying to figure out how to coexist peacefully. We don't all have to agree on everything. No, we're living like parasites who just, kill each other to get what we want. I mean, it's like, yeah, it's rough right now. And so it's tough to like not get into that mindset of just feeling like total existential crisis at the moment. But I reminded myself that, the species is made up of individual human beings. That's what it is, right? It just like your life is made up of each day that you're living. So if you can just focus on today and try to make today a loving, peaceful day where you are moving toward love and peace and trying to move the needle toward love and peace, that's a successful day. Well, if you can, focus on that same thing again tomorrow and same thing again the day after that, then your life is going well, right? Those days become your life. Each human being is part of the human species. If we can get each human being to be, really working on a little more internal peace, love, compassion, acceptance, then we start to make a difference in the world at large. And so I realized, like, wait a second, before I just want to like put myself back under the blanket and, cry, let me just think about communication again and why it matters. And the reason that I am sure that it matters is outward violence is a reflection of inward pain. It is. So anywhere you're looking in the world where you see people killing each other, it's happening because somewhere inside the person who is killing the other person, there's pain, there's rage, there's, heartache, there's frustration, there's a feeling of not being seen or heard or respected. There's, there's a feeling of being othered or alienated. And you have to be at a point of rage or to get to a place where you do not value human life anymore. There's pain. And so that is what enabled me to get back to writing the essay. And because we have a culture that is making demands on each one of us to kind of not have the uncomfortable feelings, or if you express an uncomfortable feeling, you're just shot down for it, you're attacked. It's exhausting, it's overwhelming, it's making us sick. And for the people who are doing this work already, are really trying to figure out how can I be accountable? How can I really know myself, which is that is at the heart of any spiritual practice, right? Is know yourself. And it's not a navel gazing, self-absorbed, it's not that. It's that if you don't do that work to understand yourself, then you're not going to know what's motivating you. You're not going to know what your triggers are. You're not going to know what things to look out for, what your tendencies are, what, patterns you're repeating that are maybe leading to heartache and a deeper feeling of alienation. Like, you're not going to be able to get a grip on any of that stuff and be accountable for the energy that you're spreading if you don't do some of the work of just looking inside yourself and figuring out what's going on with you. And so when you have a culture that's telling you some of your feelings are not acceptable, this is what happens. People get to a place where they cannot see straight anymore. And rage is like the only thing left, Is that going to happen for most people? No, I don't think most of us are going to get to a place where we want to go and just, just wreak violence. And that's not, but there are other things that are going to happen that are going to be, that are going to cause incredible pain and heartache in our own personal lives and our own ability to express ourselves. And that is something that you can actually work on today. I said this in the essay that I wrote. It's like, if I could snap my fingers and make all the killing stop, I would, instantly. If we could all go to sleep tonight and wake up tomorrow and find that the world had reset itself, that somehow like human beings had all gotten the memo at the same time, of course we would all choose that. I really believe that in my heart. We would all say, yes, let's do that. Let's go to sleep tonight and wake up to a world that is sane and peaceful, where we can at least tolerate each other and coexist here. And I think we would do it. But since we can't make that kind of pact, we can decide, like, I'm going to be accountable for myself. I can do that much. I'm going to make sure that whatever I'm contributing to the world around me is increasing the love quotient here, in the energy field, however you want to think about it. We are energetic creatures. I know that can sound really new agey, whatever, but the fact is, we're energetic creatures. We absorb energy, we emit energy, and we do that wherever we go. If you are having a rough day and you walk out the door, people are going to feel it. Just like if you sometimes you see someone and you don't even know, stranger, and there's like, you can feel it, you can read it. This person is like, ooh, looks a little, they're not having a good day, or this person's in love, they just had a great first date or whatever. You can feel that energy just, by being near someone. And if that's the case, then it is really powerful to work on what's happening in here and to try to certainly pause and breathe and like allow yourself to feel deeply uncomfortable or scared or anxious or heartbroken or lonely, like to let yourself feel those feelings, grief, so that they can move through you, Otherwise, you're blocking it. And the only thing that's going to happen, it's just like anything else that let's say you had like I'm just thinking about like a fire hose, and you somehow blocked, you blocked the end of that hose with, just cement or something. Just work with me on this not very good metaphor. Eventually the hose would burst. It's the same thing. It's like, we've got to, all of us, work on tolerating discomfort, tolerating the big feelings, so that we're accountable, so that they can flow through us, so we can understand ourselves more, figure out how we're feeling and why we're feeling the way that we're feeling. And then, as we walk out into the world, or whatever it is that you're doing, whatever your, part of the real loss that is involved when you do not allow yourself to feel all of your big feelings is that anger, for example, like that is one of the best motivators for productive action. But you got to let yourself feel the rage first. Then you can make the phone call. Then you can write the email. Then you can make the donation. Then you can go volunteer your time. Then you can go protest. Like, if you don't let yourself feel that feeling, it's going to come out in some, again, sideways way that's not going to help anyone, probably going to make you sick. So you're better off, and this is a big part of like having a regular meditation practice, is just getting comfortable with the idea that I'm going to have all kinds of feelings and thoughts. And not every one of my feelings is a feeling I want to act on. And not every one of my thoughts is something that I really want to give a lot of power to. But I've got to understand that I'm me, and like feelings and thoughts are going to flow through me, So there's so many great metaphors about this in like, yoga practice, for example, but this idea of like if you're a tree, right, by the bank of a river, the river's going by rapidly. The river's like your thoughts, your feelings, you're just going to keep flowing. You're the tree. You're there, your roots are growing down into the earth. The soil is going to be whatever you're cultivating, so you really want to be cultivating like love as the main thing that you're growing through and from, right? And you want to be growing toward the light here. And, the river's going to keep rushing by. And sometimes the river is going to be full of rage, and sometimes it's going to be full of heartache, but it's going to keep on flowing, and things are going to keep changing. And really the job of like an open, sensitive human being is to just let it flow. Let it flow, let it move through you, and trust that you've got solid roots. I think a lot of the time people, they get anxious about their uncomfortable feelings because they think, well, these feelings are going to do me in. They're going to knock me down. They're not. It's the not letting yourself feel them. That's the stuff that does you in. It's the pushing it down and holding it back. That's what does you in. And so if you are someone who struggles with this, and I, unfortunately, how many of us have friends who like, they're great, they're wonderful, they're smart, they're funny, they're insightful, but man, if you have a problem, they cannot do it. They don't know how to like have a hard conversation or make themselves vulnerable, or they just can't do it. I've had, I know people, like close people, who just, they cannot, when things get uncomfortable, the gate comes down, It's really hard when you're dealing with that because it blocks intimacy. If someone does not open the floodgate there to like have a tough conversation, to be able to say, I'm really hurting right now, or this thing that is happening, this transition that we're going through is really painful, and I don't know what to do with all of these feelings of sadness, and I have some anger maybe, or this isn't what I wanted, I have resistance, I'm contracting against this, I don't like it, this, I didn't see this coming. Like, if you can't do that, you're stuck, right? Like, it's not, the conversation isn't flowing, the communication isn't flowing, the other person is not allowing you to sort of like get involved in that kind of conversation and say how you're feeling, and there's no ability to work out a solution together, even if the solution is to take a breather. Like, you're cutting off the ability for connection. You're shutting it off. It's like the cement and the hose. You're saying, nope, I'm done communicating. It's too scary, it's too hard, it's too exhausting, and it's not worth it to me. And that is, it's like this level of discomfort, no matter how much I care about you, like I care about my own comfort more. I mean, it's really what's happening. I care about my ability to not feel these things more than I care about having a really uncomfortable interaction or conversation. It's a lot of people that cannot do it. It's what ghosting is, Now, again, there's always like exceptions to the rule, if you've said to someone clearly a bunch of times, this is not happening, I'm not interested, and I wish you well, then eventually, there's no other option. You got to say like, okay, now I'm cutting off communication and I'm not. There are people who make it impossible to communicate because they're so enraged all the time. All they know how to do is lash out, lash out, lash out. We probably all have people like that in our lives too. There are people who are going to run roughshod over your boundaries and not, be respectful. Boundaries, 100%. But I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the close people in your life, and just the ability to sit with uncomfortable feelings in your own internal experience and have uncomfortable conversations and sit with uncomfortable feelings, the close people in your life. Because if you can't do those things, you're not going to know yourself and you're not going to have true intimacy with anyone. And that's a fact. And that is what creates loneliness and alienation. We have so many people in our culture who feel those things because everywhere they look, they feel othered, unwelcome, shut down. And that's why it matters. If you see people in your community, and we're all in a community together, by the way, like who are being othered, whose rights are, being destroyed, like that's why it matters for you to speak up, especially if you have more power in a society. It does matter, because if you don't, those are the people, okay? Those are the people who are eventually like, they're going to feel so lost to themselves and to this life that there isn't going to be that value on human life anymore, because no one's valuing their life or their feelings. So it does matter, it does matter that we care about each other and that we try to bridge the gap and, build a bridge and have a conversation and examine our own fears. Like all these things really do matter. And I hope that, something in this, like just, I hope I've made the connection here clear, because there's like the microcosm, right? There's each person and there's the macrocosm, there's the society. And if I could, fix the whole society, I'd do it just like you would, but I cannot do that. All I can do is just hope that anyone who's listening or reading or, wanting to have conversations like this feels inspired to make their own internal world a more peaceful place. And I'm certainly always here for, any support that you need or anything that I can do. And I welcome your comments, and I think I'm pretty easy to find. Thank you for joining me for this talk. And I know I'm like really fired up, and I'm heartbroken. I mean, I could cry anytime at all, because I just, I'm so sad for the way the world is right now, and for our children, all of our children. I'm so sad, and I'm just hoping with every last shred of hope that I have that we're going to like get it together and do better than this. I'm really like, I'm putting all the hope I have into that idea that we're going to, somehow get the memo here and just start being kinder to ourselves and each other, gentler with ourselves and each other, and shift the way this world is right now. Thank you for joining me for this talk.